I first became interested in Maisel's murals when I first saw them. I was walking downtown. I think it would have been the late fall, early winter of 1968, in a huge snowstorm. I was in college and I walked downtown in the snowstorm and walking by Maisel's, there they were. And I stopped and looked, and it really had an impression on me at that time. Then the years go by and years go by. So we moved here in 2010. And because I spent a lot of time and a lot of money in Maisel's, I thought, gee, I got interested in these things again. The book that I did, Albuquerque Declan Pueblo, which was the first of the Arcadia books, which is a survey of architectural history in the second half of the 20th century, well, most of the 20th century in Albuquerque. I thought it was important to publish images, granted black and white, of all the murals, which I did. Time marches on, and in 19, good heavens, 2018, it became clear to me that Skip was going to pack it in, that this was looking like it was going to be the end of it. And I thought, if I'm going to write a book on Maisel's and get this going, I need to do it. So I did. And it's like down here. And I need to get the first slide up. And we'll get the first slide up. So,
Light,
Can we change the lights?
reduce the light.
Release the lights and couple of this.
oh, okay.
Is that okay?
No,
Kill these.
Well,
overhead lights.
lighter. The stage lights need to go south. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first book I did, which was a little rushed in 2018, is this guy, and it was published by Sunstone Press, which is a little bit of a vanity press, but not much. Anyhow, it got rushed, and I really wanted to do a little more. And the result of that was being asked to give a lecture in 2020 on the murals. In preparation for that, getting carried away, as is my custom, I did another book, and that's what this lecture is going to be based on, because this is primarily a viewer's guide, what to look for when you're looking at the murals. I hope pretty much everybody, I ran out of handouts. That's wonderful, thank you. But you all have, most of you have a handout, and that handout has an illustration that shows how the murals are laid out, which is a very important thing. And then on the back side, there's information about the artists who painted them. I'm not going to go into that in a whole lot of detail. In fact, not much detail at all, because it's in the handouts. Let's see, if I go forward. I'm not going forward. Do I turn it on?
There.
Oh, okay, well, I'll just have to.
No, try to go backwards and then forward.
What?
Try to go backwards and forwards.
Oh, in advancing the slides.
No, we're not happening. I'll just have to point. I can do that. I can do it. Anyhow. Maisel's was founded by Maurice Maisel, who came to this country in 1897. I'm fairly certain he's from Austria. Came to New York first, and after a brief time in New York, moved out west. In 1910, he was a telegrapher, a telegraph operator, and he was in Silver City, where he got married and stuff. Apparently, he became fascinated with Southwestern stuff. And the story is that he was driving his Model T all around the Southwest, buying and selling stuff. I know really little more than that. I know early on he carried Mexican stuff, so I suspect he was probably going down to Mexico as well and purchasing things in Mexico. that said, the revolution in 1917 would have put the kibosh on that. At any rate. This is a postcard from the store when it opened up, and this is the location at 510 Central. The first store that he established in 1924, when he moved from Silver City up here to Albuquerque, obviously, was right across the street from the train station. Where basically half a block out from where Tucana's, or whatever it's now called, is there on Central and First. He would have been competing with the Harvey Indian store across the street. And of course, the main way people were coming into town in 1910 was on the train. So that proved to be a successful business. And sometime, I'm not sure of the exact date, in the late 1920s, early 30s, he moved to the Usari building, which I'm sure you all know, on the south side of Central. The ground floor of the Usari building. There's a really funny postcard that just has the front facade of Maisel's. The whole top of the building is missing. But you see that around a lot. And after a few years in the Usari building, in 1936, he engaged John Gamin to do a design for the store where it is now at 510 Central. This is a postcard soon after Maisel's opened. Let's go back to that prior postcard. I've already started talking about these guys for a really long time. So we'll get to them in a bit. The business flourished. Maisel's did a very good job, and talking with John Gamin, and there are transcripts of meetings that Maisel had with me about what he wanted. And he didn't want to have the faux Pueblo, like, what is it? It was just a Wright's trading post, which was a beautiful big Pueblo thing down on the corner of Gold and 4th or 5th. He didn't want to do that. That had been done. And he wanted something new and modern and that was cutting edge, which is why I hired John Gamin. John Gamin was right at the height of being a very big deal. He is the New Mexico architect at that time. He was the architect for at the time. So this was the guy, if you're gonna go, the architect. Interestingly enough, Maisel's doesn't look anything like the kind of buildings that are generally associated with John Gamin. Not at all. Meme did do some really interesting modernistic buildings. He was interested in the modern movement, but that isn't, of course, obviously what he's known for. I don't know what was on this site beforehand. I haven't been able to figure that out. I suspect it was a vacant lot. There might have been a building there, but it probably burned down. Who knows? I'm making that up. It's not quite what was there before, but it's primarily just the storefront since it's sandwiched between two brick buildings. That said, Maisel said he wanted to have a pit in the middle because he was hiring Native Americans at the time, and he was very, very big on that. That was important to him. And he wanted to hire silversmiths to be making the goods that he sold in the store on site. And he wanted you to be able to see it. So when you walk in there, there's that big pit. He wanted to have an office up on a second level, so there's a second level in the back where the owner can hold court and look down and survey the domain. He also had very clear ideas about what he wanted the front facade of the building to look like. And it wasn't Pueblo. He wanted it to be really modern. He took trips on a number of occasions to visit relatives in Los Angeles. And at some point, he had seen a building in Los Angeles that had the kind of facade entryway that he liked and was attracted to. I haven't been able, there's a name of it, I've forgotten that, it doesn't really matter. I haven't been able to track it down. Apparently that building had the same kind of entry, except it was curvilinear, since it was a deco-ish kind of building there, we're all around it. Maurice said, no, I don't want around, I want square, Southwest. So that was where he came up with the idea for what the entry was, which is really a two-part deal where you see it from the street level, then you go through a vestibule and enter into the entry before you go into the store proper. That was Maisel's idea, and Meme said, fine, no problem. Having the cases were all made nickel plated, they were apparently quite gorgeous, and you see pictures of them, you had all the stuff custom made. Opened the store, and it was a success. Meme suggested that there needed to be murals, and that those murals should reflect essentially what was going to be sold in the store. Maurice said, great. But the subject matter is not me. We're not going to do that. We'll figure this out. Who do you want to do these things? Well, Meme said he wanted to hire Olive Rush to paint the murals, to do the whole thing. And Maurice said, that's fine. Well, Olive said she'd do it. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with Olive Rush. She's a very big deal and a very important artist in her own right. She had been involved with the Santa Fe Indian School. We'll talk about that a little more in a bit. And she said, sure, I'll be happy to do it, but you got to include Native Americans in the program at painting. So there are 17 murals. Olive Rush painted 3 of them. The rest of them are painted by a number of different Native American artists, chosen by Olive and by extension, Dorothy Dunn. It's not clear exactly how that connection started. Dorothy Dunn had left the Indian School by then. And she was, it's a long story, but she ended up in Taos and she was teaching school up there. And she said, well, I can't be really involved with this. Olive is the one to really do it. Fortunately, all of his papers are all online and they're all open source, as this stuff should be. And they're wonderful, and you can access them and read the whole thing, and I read it. And it was kind of a shock, and there was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of correspondence. Anyhow, that was very useful. The studio, I'll digress slightly. The budget for doing the murals was $1,500, a flat fee. That was it. And from that, Olive had to buy all the materials, had to pay for having the scaffolding built so you could get up there and do the work. Had to go through that whole process. Let's see, that shouldn't have been the first. Go to the next. Go to the next. Okay. Here we are at the Indian School. Good. Dorothy Dunn started the program at the Indian School in 1932. It opened. It was the first, this is in Santa Fe. And it was the first government program for Native American artists. Dorothy Dunn was a teacher. She had a little bit of background, not a lot. Her philosophy, her goals for this program when she was hired, I don't think they took it very seriously, but the government was kind of changing its programs a little bit at that time and was trying to do something that was a little more local, meaningful, if you will. As you know, up until that point in the Indian School, you weren't going to be speaking whatever language you spoke. You were just going to be speaking English. Your culture was suppressed. This was nothing to be celebrated. This art program had a different outlook, and I'll read you what Dorothy Dunn said about what her goals were. Her goals were to foster appreciation of Native American painters, to produce new paintings, to keep within established standards, to study traditional art mediums, to maintain tribal and individual identities. Given the criticism that she gets later on, that was kind of a rather benign start, I think. Was she paternalistic? Yeah, absolutely. But I think you see from the goals that she had to begin with that she had the right idea. And she was doing this for a well-reasoned and meaningful way, and that she really wanted to be able to bring out the skills that Native Americans had. She had an idea, which I think is probably a outgrowth of the noble savage kind of idea from the 19th century, that Native Americans had some special juju in being able to, express themselves. And that there was something unique about them as Native Americans, and that needed to be brought out. And she also realized that talking about Indians, like gonna do it, that who are you talking about? Pueblos? Which Pueblos? You're talking about Diné, Navajo, okay, Eastern Western Reservation, where you go? We got all these Apaches, we got all this stuff, all this plains things. There'd been a little bit of art that was coming out of the plains. I forget the Indian school now, I think it was Kansas, I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. At any rate, thank you. That's good. Haskell, thank you. That had looked at plains things, and they were being influenced by paintings that were done on teepees, on lodges, primarily. Southwest, it comes at a different place. With the Diné cultures, you've got a whole sand painting tradition, which is probably coming out of the Pueblos in the first place. Pueblos have a really rich, that's another discussion we're gonna have. The Pueblos have a very, very rich artistic expression, as anyone who's seen pictographs and petroglyphs know. And as many of you have really seen from Kiva murals and Kiva paintings. If you look at old Bureau of Ethnology reports, you'll see those. And those are, it's secret, it's esoteric information, it's very powerful, it's not to be shared. So nonetheless, there is a very, very strong painting tradition with the Pueblos. And these traditions that we're going back were things that Dorothy Dunn really wanted to bring out. In doing murals, this is the Indian school. You know, all of these murals, when the Indian school was torn down in the dead of night, these murals were destroyed. These murals had been already listed. I'm not sure their exact status, but there was an agreement that they would be preserved and that they were going to be employed. And this was the studio at the Indian school. And in the dead of the night, the whole buildings were knocked down. That was the end of it, which is a real shame because there's some really interesting murals there, or there were. So this is all a Sarah painting. This is the murals on the front. And see what I wanted to say. I don't want to lose my train of thought. The murals were painted over a period of 3 weeks in April of 1939. And just a few days, so it was April, I've got the dates. It was April 10th, 11th, 14th, 15th, 20th, and 29th. That was it. Some artists painted just one of the murals. Other artists painted more, a couple in cases. And as I said, all I've painted 3 of them. All I've had to pay for the materials and for the scaffolding and the whole thing, which she did. And while teaching mural painting at the Indian school, as she had done it, because Dorothy Dunn was a friend of hers, she'd done a whole number of projects across the country, federal buildings, a whole lot of projects. This was to be her last project. And I think she gave really special focus to this. And I think it's one of the reasons she wanted to make certain that the range of Native American students that were employed in this project were brought into it. Often it's said that they were artists all from the Indian schools. They weren't. Most of them were, but not all of them. There were 11 different artists. Sarah, and they come from 2 different groups. The old school, which is the beginnings of Native American fine art, if you will, in the Southwest, was only represented by Sarah. He was the old master of how you did this kind of art. He got himself in big trouble early on in his life for painting images that had been Kiva images. He got beat up.
Of what?
Kiva images.
Oh.
Images that had been inside
Oh, right.
in Kivas. This is very secret, very important information not to be easily let out. And it's considered to be very powerful, very important. He used some examples. He painted this stuff. He liked to paint. And he got in deep trouble for that. And we'll talk about some of what that means in a couple of minutes. But he got beat up. That said, he's considered the first really master of Native American art. His influences are coming primarily from Kiva paintings, interestingly enough. So that's an important thing. Let's go to the next. Okay, this starts in McGay working on the other side. Now, we'll talk about how these murals are done, but the murals have a very specific kind of layout. They're all paired. And they're different themes, and I'll go into what those themes are, but they're themes of summer and winter. They're decorative related things, dancers that are opposed opposites. You know, two female butterfly dancers, one from Kerchety, one I picked up. You know, they'll be opposite each other. And until you spend a lot of time looking at these things, you don't really catch on to the design characteristics. So when you're looking at the front of Maisel's from the street, if you look up at it, on the left side, you've got a Pueblo feast day dance, core dance. That's there. If you look over on the right side, you've got a blue-faced Navajo dance, give a chick dance. So next. And then way at the back is, I think, the most modernistic of the designs. And you have things that are all in between. Well, Sarah was the old school. People from the studio school, a couple of them, they were kids, 16 years old. Tony Martinez was 16 when he painted this. He was still working in that. He was still just coming out of that program. So he was doing things the way he was taught to do. A few of the other artists had moved on. And this is an example of Marcelo Abeda. Tony Abeda's father, y'all know who Tony Abeda is, his dad, was heavily influenced by Raymond Johnson. Advertising art, modernistic looking art. This is the far end of that. This is as far out there as any of this stuff really got. The perspective, we'll talk about it. Perspective is weird. It's like you're down on the ground looking up at these guys. So there's quite a gamut. There's some very interesting idiosyncratic styles. Pop Chile, and we'll see her Bambi in a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about the characteristics of murals before we get into them. They're all flat on a monochromatic background. So they all have a very flat face to them, and the background is just going to be one color. It's an off-white yellow color. They all have that. They lack European three-point perspective. That was seen and Dorothy did very much by design, was not trying to turn these guys into European painters. That was European painting stuff. We want Native American painting stuff. Gotta do your own thing. That's going to be a different deal. So perspective is implied by the size of figures and by the relationship between the figures and by how the viewer is looking at the figures. Typically, the viewer is a voyeur, you're a tourist. You're just looking. There are a few cases where that's a little different, where the image in the mural is engaging the viewer, but that's pretty rare. We'll talk about this because it's pretty funny, actually. Also, figures and objects are outlined in black to heighten them and bring them up. So, with an image like this, we'll talk about Paulina Varney to see more on this in a minute, but that mural that she did has her sisters and her grandmother and her mother, they're all in the front, and out in front they're selling pottery. Well, most of Paulina Varney's family were potters, they weren't painters. And as I looked at them, I thought, if you really studied the pots that are in front of these women, they could figure out who did them. And I think that's what's happening here. This is Pablito's sister, Gloria Tafoya. This is a blow up of the image that's on, that's at Maisel's, or her mural at Maisel's. The one at the right is a pot that she did, that Gloria Tafoya did. I bought it for $50 on eBay. I was like, damn, that was just amazing.
Yeah.
It was really, it was good. And as I look at it, when you turn it around, yes, that image, I mean, there's no question that that's what's coming out of that. And we'll talk about that a little more as we get farther on. So there are some real family kinds of relationships with other images. I was stunned when I really started studying them at how detailed they are. There's a huge amount of detail in many of them. The precision and the craftsmanship that comes out of that was surprising to me. And it's kind of a problem because when you first go in there, the light's bad, you can't really see them. They're looking up and they're up there. You can't really see these things. So you don't get a real good view of what they look for. I'll talk more about that in a second because I have a show and tell. At any rate, when you really study them, you can see, okay, look at the buttons on the Maisels on the shoes. You've got them in profile, you've got them head on. You go through the images and you see this constantly, that there's a level of detail which I found really quite stunning and didn't get until I was staring at photographs of them all the time. Next. Okay. Movement, as I said, is implied in a number of different ways. Typically, you have this Cosa here dancing. We'll talk about him in a minute. The rest of he's a pretty funny figure, but this is the way movement is implied in the murals. And they're subjects of men and women. There are male and female. So this is just a part showing the male on the left and female writer on the right. This is Aveda's big mural at the end, the largest one, 300 and some whatever inches long. And it shows a novel pronghorn hunt. Now, there are interesting themes that come through. Novels look at this and read this as life and death. This is a ceremony or a ceremonial thing, a ceremonial hunt, which involves going out hunting, killing the animals, bringing them back. There's a lot of association with ritual. Janae Novel looking at this is going to understand those connections between the living and dying, and relationships that are going on here that we just don't grasp at all. We don't have that kind of background or see that sort of thing. Typically, as I said, the viewer is a lawyer. However, there are some exceptions. This is one of them. This is always Sarah's mural out in the front. And this is a Taylor clown that comes up. And these guys are not to be messed with. They are a big deal in the ceremonial structure of a pueblo. They are enforcers. They are said to be able to speak any language, anywhere. And if you get out of line or if you get in trouble, these used to be the enforcers. Now, as you know, when you go to feast days, the enforcers are all, with their bulletproof vests and tribal police things. But these guys, I've seen them at dances, being enforcers. And the Pueblos understand this. This guy is looking right at the viewer. If for the average tourist looking at it, that'd be anything. For any Pueblo looking at this, it's gonna go, oh, this is not good. I don't want to get his attention. I don't want to be there with this. And they will be very rude. There'll be a lot of sexually oriented jokes. I saw their counterparts, the Kasharis at Hopi one time, some German tourists that were getting a little out of control and not paying attention. And one of them gave them a Nazi salute. The Germans were not pleased, but that's the kind of thing that they would do. I've seen them take phones away from people who were trying to take a picture. And dance on it, stomp on it, take it away, it's gone. Yeah, that's the rule, you're not supposed to do that, there are plenty of signs, and if you break the rules, not so good. So I think there's a little hidden meaning going on in here, whether it has to do with Awa just saying this is fun, it's an inside joke. But I wouldn't be surprised, as I was driving down, I was thinking about this, thinking, you know, these guys beat him up when he was a kid. So there's a lot of depth and meaning going on. In another example, so I said very few of the figures are actually engaging with the viewer. This is Republic of Velarde's mural. That's the painting in the mural on the left. That's a photograph of her about the same time. That's Public of Velarde. I'm almost certain it is. She did paint herself into her work. Fairly off, not a lot, but fairly off. She's known to do that. She was also known to be pretty mischievous and pretty funny. So she would do stuff like that. That would be consistent with her personality, I suspect. So I think that's what's going on here. Obviously, the hairstyle difference in different places, but I feel very confident that that's her, that she did her self-portrait into the mural and went on. Now, I started to talk about the layout a little bit earlier, but this is the layout starting on the street. And you have it on your handout, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this. The handout tells the story. You have summer and winter opposite. You have male and female opposites. You have Pueblo Navajo, like the big one on the front, going back and forth opposites. You have, they call mountain spirits, we call them gone dancers back in the day. Apache dancers that are dancers for part of the puberty ceremony. If you haven't been to Escalero 4th of July, usually go down and see it. It's really stunning. It's way better than seeing it at the Indian Cultural Center, way better. And anyhow, so you've got White Mountain on one side, Mescalero on the other side, that kind of thing. That opposition was done. Now, I don't think, in fact, I think I can be very certain that Olive wasn't telling the painters what to paint. There's unfortunately in all of her mass of papers, she doesn't talk about this project, or at least not except in very superficial way. Although there are some things that are really key that came out of that about this, which I'll talk about in a minute. But at any rate, she didn't go into a whole lot of detail. So I really don't know. But she was working with the artists because she knew them really well. And I think was encouraging them to do what they do best, what they could do. I mean, Sarah Abeda has done those antelopes, they're gazillions, but they're not antelopes, they're pronghorns. And he has done those pronghorns a gazillion times. That was a common thing. And various themes that various artists picked up on, they did their thing, and that's the way Olive did it. That said, how much she was sort of guiding, well, yeah, well, that kind of, I don't have any idea. So here we are, we'll start now. I'm going to go through the murals. I think, oh, one thing I wanted to talk about, a key feature. We talked about the major characteristics, first and second generation. Creativity through constraint was something that Dorothy Dunn harped on and that Olive liked as well. That these murals and this style of art have been criticized a lot for not allowing freedom of expression. And Dorothy Dunn's view was, you got to get the basics down, you got to be the basic thing down, and then you can go on and do whatever you're going to do. And that's generally what happened with a number of these artists. But she and this artwork has been criticized because of that quite a bit. I've read 5 of these Arcadia books. Well, the Arcadia books, you know, the captions can't be more than 200 words. And a lot of people really don't like that. I love it because I have 200 words and I got to really think about what I'm going to say. What's important about this that This is the key stuff. And I think it was that kind of thing that Dorothy Dunn was doing with these artists as well. Once you get the basic stuff down, and once you're constrained by that, then it can go in whatever other direction you want it to go. We talked about movement and precision and detail, men versus women, engaging the viewer. A final subject is kitsch, which is something I'm interested in, because this kind of art and these materials are often criticized as being kitschy. And later on, as it is expressed now, well, yeah, I mean, how many mugs with R.C. Gorman images on them can you have? We all had a bunch of them at one time. Unfortunately, we don't see quite as many as we used to, but any gift shop is full of Native American kitsch stuff. My goodness, it just gets out of control. And that is an unfortunate outgrowth that comes first, but that's obviously not what's happening here with these murals and with these artists. It's at a different level. For something to be kitsch, it has to be beautiful. It has to be emotionally charged. When you look at the image, there can be no ambiguity in kitsch. You've got to know exactly what it is and be able to identify with the emotion of it, which means that there really isn't such a thing as bad kitsch. Bad kitsch is just bad art. And there is no abstract kitsch. You can't do an abstract painting that's kitsch. It's just a bad abstract painting. So I think that's an important distinction.
What's he holding with the whole thing?
Oh, the banner, have you been, you need to go to a feast day. The schedule is up on the IPCC website. And go to a feast day. You have not been to one, you must go. We were out at where we're at Sandia was last Tuesday.
Okay,
Really great.
wow.
Yeah, really excellent, really worth going. There were 221 dancers at Sandia. Well, the club was only got 240 old members. So, which I thought was something, but in a corn dance, and it's a very formalized, very stylized dance. You'll see a guy carrying a big banner. Sometimes you'll have a chorus of 40 or 50 guys, sometimes it's much smaller, sometimes there are a bunch of drums, sometimes there's one drum, depends on the pueblo, it depends on where it is in the situation.
Is it furled or full size?
Pardon me?
Is that furled or full size?
Oh, that's full size.
Oh.
Yeah, they're only about that wide.
Oh,
They're just about that wide. And typically they're embroidered, but not always. I can go into that in mind-numbing detail, but they're worth, it's worth going. If you haven't been, go. The big rule is when it's going on, don't talk too much. Don't take photographs. Don't ask direct questions. That's really rude. And part of the reason it's really rude is there are multiple layers of ritual knowledge at various depths. And unless you're part of the in crowd and the initiated person, you may not know. And if you ask somebody in a pueblo specifically about something, they may actually not know the answer, and that's just embarrassing. You just don't want to do it. It's not as big a deal as it used to be, but it is just a little bit of being polite. If you get invited to have food, go. It would be rude not to. I've had friends who said, oh gosh, you couldn't eat out of those houses, you know, the food's gonna be silly. We go to at least half a dozen, sometimes more a year. I've been doing that for 14 years and never had any problems with the food. So it's well worth going. That's what that image is. The women are wearing tabletas. In this case, that's what that board is up on their head. Usually they're in two separate groups. There are moieties, there's the turquoise guys. You can usually tell them what their turquoise armbands, and they're the squash guys or pumpkin guys, and they're going to be all painted brown. You can't miss that distinction.
they're holding some sort of greenery.
Oh, yeah, they carry pine bells typically. And it varies. If you go a lot, my friend and I go all the time. Literally every time we go, we see something new. It looks like it's exactly the same thing over and over again. It's not. I can recognize the distinction between Taylor songs and Creason songs now. I can tell things are different. Some of the songs are old and traditional, the chants they've been going on forever. Some of them, there'll be a brand new one that they've written, put together just for that particular dance. And then there'll be all kinds of little detailed permutations. I'm digressing too much, but at Sandia, the women all had their arms painted white and they had this zigzag thing on their arms. I see that guys, I've never seen that before. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. These are Apache dancers, mountain spirit dancers, are called gone dancers. You've got Ignacio Palmer, Apache on one side, Mesclero, White Mountain on the other side. Notice that the guy on the left, he's not really moving that fast. He's kind of shuffling on. Excuse me, the other way around. The guy on the right is going to shuffle on. Guy on the left, they have a very characteristic stomp that they do. And this is implying that stomp. If you know that, you look at that and you can see that, you can hear it. This is Joe Herrera on the left from Concha de Pueblo. It's butterfly dance. It's right in the inner vestibule. This is we're going into the space, by the way, in the organization. So we start out on the street. We're moving in the inner vestibule, the corners where those Apache guys. We're in the middle of the vestibule, and you have these two images that are facing each other. They're complementary in size, they're complementary in color. It's really not a thing. That's all I write with the corn, with the family by the corn on the right. And then, of course, the next thing you see before you see the other ones around you, you see this big pronghorn hunt with its very weird perspective. Once again, like I said, it's like being on the ground looking up at them. Over on the right, you have vegetation at each end, which is very mannerist. It's huge. It's an interesting thing. I've had, anyhow, one of the next. Back up, one back. One more. Forward. Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, Tony Martinez. These were both done by Tony Martinez. He was 60 years old when he painted those. Does everybody know who he is? Tony Martinez, is Maria Martinez's husband. He did a lot of the painting on Maria's pots. I said son.
It's her son.
I understand. I'm sorry, I'm old. Tony Martinez was Maria Martinez's son. And let me get this straight. Thank you for that. If that, it'll happen again, trust me. At any rate, these are often called Thunderbirds. They're not. We don't have Thunderbirds in the Southwest. That's a Northwest Coast thing. And you see them up in the east as well. You see, we don't have them out here. We have things called knife wings, which is kind of what that is, or things like that. And we have what's interpreted as rainbirds. Now, it's really gotten conflated because of a lot of stuff that's being done now. We say Thunderbirds, but they're not. And these guys are pretty much the same kind of image, although there's key differences, obviously, with the heads and the beaks are really different. You got a kind of parrot there on the right and or on the left, or whatever that guy is on the right. Next. Next. Yes. It's being recalcitrant. Yeah. Okay, there we go. These are female deer dancers that are part of the winter ceremony. During the during the summertime, the dance cycle is corn dances and you have these big communal dances. That's going on all summer. In the wintertime, you have animal dances. You have buffalo dances and deer dances and a range of animal related things. There are, and I will see the deer guys in a minute, but there are female counterparts to them. We've got a deer dancer here, and that's, and as I see, that's a butterfly. Maybe on the other side, but they're very complementary. Here, deer dancer, corn dancer. You know, the ones in the prior picture had their embroidered kilts on. Here you have the basic, well, female attire and garb, holding eagle feathers. The one on the left is Ben Quintana. Unfortunately, he was killed during World War II. I think he was absolutely the best. I just top line is, it's interesting to compare his line work here with the work that was done by Theodore Suessa on the right-hand side. It's just, Quintana was really a spectacular draftsman. And that's the situation with that. I should comment also that, and you'll see it from the table, that a lot of these guys ultimately were soldiers in World War II. They were soldiers who were in the Navy. One of them was a code talker. This is Olive Brush again. Olive Brush studied in the Orient, and she was heavily influenced by Oriental art. Who would have guessed looking at that? So you've got your basically Tang Dynasty horse going on here. And it really is. There's no question there. So, but this was a very decorative motif from Olive Brush. Next. Now, the big Paulina Velarde extravaganza. This is my favorite. There's Paulina on the left. Three of her sisters are in there. The older woman on the right, I'm 90% certain is Margaret Tafoya, their grandmother. It's a family of potters. Santa Clara, they are selling their wares at Santa Clara. And Paulina was nothing if not decorative with the patterns. It's just wonderful. She commented that Maisel was very nice to the artists when they were working, that he would bring out milk and cookies and Cokes, and that he liked to chat with the artists. That he was always very supportive and very interested in what they were painting. And he wasn't at all trying to influence what was being sold in the store. This is the only one of the murals that has anything to do with stuff that was sold in the store. The rest of them are all not so much. Not at all, actually. Next. Okay, Populi, Bambi, we're seeing here, was a real character. She was half Taos from Taos and an East Indian mother from India. And she was apparently, well, she's quite an iconoclast and quite a character. She dressed up. Anyway, she did lots of murals. One of the big ones was for a department store in Chicago. And you know, oh, Bambi, this is before Disney. The influence has often said, oh, Populi was influenced by Disney. I think it's the other way around. Disney visited the Indian school in the mid-30s, and he saw her work. And he tried to hire her. And the story, perhaps apocryphal, is she said, thanks, but no thanks. I don't want to paint Mickey Mouse hands for my whole life. So I got to do that. So it's a good story anyway. But this was the kind of thing that she liked to do. So this was done before Disney. We know that Disney acquired a couple, at least one, and I think several of her works when he was out here visiting. He visited the Indian school. He saw this. He was influenced by it. Like I said, he tried to hire her. So the influence is coming from popular to distant, not the other way around. And then opposite, on the total opposite end of the lobby, we have the last of the olive brush paintings. And here we have public deer dancers. We saw the female deer dancers, the males, have their little front lady things they do around like that. And they have these nice headpieces with the antlers on them. And we're gonna wrap it up. And we'll wrap it up again with this image. As a final note, I think that's the end of it. Anyhow, that's fine, just leave that up, that's great. I've been waving the flag for Maisels for years, and I haven't gotten any real traction. And I've often wondered why. Well, some of it is I'm just this guy. I mean, my background is in archaeology, anthropology, and geology. I'm not an art historian. When I did the book in 2018, I tried to hire an art historian because I wanted to have somebody who was in that world. And it didn't work out. We were incompatible, just didn't work. So I just did it myself. And over the years, there's a professor, Colgate, and several other people that I've now been in correspondence with that I've learned a huge amount from and who've used the book and contributed on things. And that's been very helpful. But it's only gone so far, and they're back east, they're not around here. The interest here just hasn't happened. I did a 5-minute piece for Colores, which is on, thank you for putting that on the website, which was great. I think it's gotten close to 900 hits, and then it's kind of the end of it. I've tried to contact the Garcias and make a connection. They bought the building from Maisels because I did the book in 2018 and Maisels closed in 2019. So right at the, yes.
We should probably note that the owners of the building, the Garcias, are
Right.
in the audience today.
You are.
Yes,
Oh,
right there.
Oh, okay.
hey. Thank you for coming. So I've been fixated on forever and it didn't happen. There were photographs that were done a few years ago, which are at the museum. My efforts to access that is just basically failed. I haven't been able to really get through. And in the final analysis, they're very high quality, they're wonderful images, knew they were gonna be great. Wanted to use them for my reconstruction of the murals, and the result of that was nothing. Nothing came out of it, and I got a little pushback. There's this idea, well, there's gotta be money involved in here. There's no money involved here. I'm not asking for any money, I just wanted access to it. And in the final analysis, I didn't need 1,200 or 2,400 DPI images. I've taken a lot of pictures of Maisel's murals over the years. So I just used my own images to do it, and that was fine. That's fine for this kind of reproduction. Any more than 300 DPI doesn't make any difference. Then a few years ago, and in real final conclusion, I thought, oh, I'll put together a display. And I'll do banners. I'll see what that's involved.
Oh, neat.
Oh, my God.
So as a test, this is, right here. This is Paulina Velarde's mural. This is full size. This is the size they are,
Oh, neat.
okay?
Now we need the lights back on.
It cost, I think this one cost me $60. I could do, I know, it's cheap. There's a system set up for these kind of banners. I was ready to put together a program to just do it. It's gonna cost $1,300 to have them all done, and I did several. One of them was the one of Tony Abeda's father's. I was talking to him at Antiques Roadshow a few years ago, and he came by and we bonded, and he ended up buying that one. That was just a test because it was his dad's.
Interesting.
But so at any rate, I got involved in other projects and at a big textile show last year, so that didn't happen. But I was more than happy to just have these made and do it. And I thought it would be a really wonderful kind of display. It'd be great out here in the room out there. You just hang up, and this way you can see them at eye level. You actually see what's going on with these things. And these are the restored versions, so they're a little sharper than what the
How did
originals.
you get permission to do that? I mean, is there a copyright issue?
No, I know Skip Maisel. I said, Skip, mind if I take pictures? Sure, they didn't care. Skip didn't care.
What's going on with the painting? I mean, Garcia's on the paintings now.
Well, this was done long before the Garcias. This was put together at some point. So I don't know. Typically, I've taken the philosophy of asking for forgiveness rather than permission. And generally, that's worked pretty well. But, you know, in terms of getting permission to take these images and do this, I didn't do that. I mean, that's Skip. I've got gazillions of images of those murals I've done over the years. And I did them, he didn't care. You know, and Skip never got really excited about it. On the one hand, on the other hand, he was always supportive of what I was doing. He made stuff available. He let me do what I wanted to do. And for that, I'm very grateful for his involvement. Unfortunately, he didn't have very many images because, or records, because the place had burned in the 70s. So most things were burned down. Most of the records are all gone.
Cole, you talked about the restorations. Could you talk a little? You
Well, this is
mentioned
the restoration is what I did, and it's digital.
Digital restoration.
It's a digital restoration, and I talk about that in the book, which is available for $10. That said, the restoration is digital.
So the paintings were never restored.
The paintings have never been restored. They still show some damage from fire and stuff. Yes.
Just to clarify, since I've owned the building, I've gotten 2 phone calls from people that have asked to, and I work every day, they've asked to photograph the murals and I got them both in within 2 days, so.
Yeah.
Saying that we're not available isn't really fair, but also,
It's a museum.
and also I've worked with the head of ethnographic studies at Stanford, and she came out to look at restoring the murals, but the materials that they were used, you know, that casein is derived from milk.
Yeah.
And tempera is so hard to work with, and then the murals on the interior are a lot different from the ones on the street because they were affected differently by exhaust. And I've actually had 2 other people come out and look at them, and they're so scared to mess with them. It's not like the ones that are done where the walls were prepared so much better, like at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, and the scale so large.
Right.
So we've tried to hire 3 people at our own expense to try to get it done right, and there's some cracking in there, and we've spent a lot of money on the building. I restuccoed it with John Gomme's original buff stucco color and mixture.
Great.
Redid the security gates on there to try to preserve the murals, but it's one of those things that once you put the first brush on it, you kind of can't go back.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to malign or imply that.
Well, I'm
The
used
problem I had.
to it for
Yes.
this group.
No, I didn't mean to do that because I made a couple of phone calls.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
as
if you
far as
call
I
the
got.
operator at our company, it goes straight to me, and I've had 2 people call. One lady was from Berkeley and she did a book. And then there was another local guy who was super nice that wanted to take them, and I even lit them up for him, and I was gonna tell Mr. Adam, if this group ever wants to go see him.
Yes.
You're more than welcome, and
Great.
we'll open it up. Maybe I won't invite you, but we'll.
Yeah. I'd rather I see them. I don't need to see.
We'd be happy to light them up in there because the lighting is very, very strange in those back caverns, but they do look, considering how old they are, they do look.
Yeah.
But they're a very, very hard restoration candidate.
Yeah, well, fortunately, she used really good paint. Fortunately, she didn't use, because they were just using poster paints at the end of school. So fortunately, she knew, Olive Brush knew a lot about doing murals and doing mural art. And she knew about plaster. So she used, and she paid for it, really high quality materials. And that's the reason, even though they suffered a little bit from the fire back in the day.
I think they still look great.
Oh, they look fabulous. I mean, they're cracks, but there's no huge dents. They're not really very thick. And,
So how thick are they?
oh, they're about this thick.
Oh, it's still thick.
Yeah, I mean, they're panels, but they're not that big. I mean, they're all the same, they're really not that big. To do it, you'd have to do some structural stuff, but you could pull those off of there. It just cost a lot. To actually do it. But I can appreciate that it's a big expense and a difficult thing to do. So I said my initial reaching out was in 2018. And I only made a couple of calls and I didn't get very far. And I just decided it didn't matter. I just gave up. Then when the museum stuff was happening, I was trying to get connections with the museum to use those images. And after a couple of fairly frustrating phone calls, I said, who needs it? I didn't need it, so that was,
Not the owner. It was the museum that was the problem, not the owner.
It was the museum that was a problem, not
Okay,
the owner.
see, they're not blaming you, it was the museum.
Indeed, the problem that I had initially to use images and all, that was from the museum. It was not
This museum,
Here.
the Albuquerque.
this museum
Yeah.
where we are now standing. Yeah,
I was just to say, noting the ages, incredibly young ages
yeah.
of the artists. I think you said that most of them, except for the 44-year-old, were Olive Rush's students, was that correct?
That's correct.
And so she picked them to do this or possibly?
I don't know exactly how she picked them, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Mike, can use the microphone.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure how they were picked exactly, but I suspect because Olive had run the program at the Indian School and been a mural part of the paintings, murals at the Indian School, that she was hiring people that she was familiar with. And I won't forget you. And that was the thing. She certainly knew them. One of the things you saw on the chart on the back, she actually paid them quite well. There was $330 that went to the Indian School that probably would have just disappeared at the Indian School, which was supposed to support the artists. Olive, out of her $1,500, she went and she paid the artists, and she paid a fair wage. For the time she was paying $5 a day, which was a really good wage at the time. I mean, a skilled craftsman at that time was earning, what, $15 a week. So she paid them, and she paid them well. For some of the more established artists like Sarah and Pop Jolie, and Paulina Velarde, she put them up at the Franciscan Hotel across the street. She paid them a little bit more. They got a little bit more out. But people were well paid. Yeah, what I was gonna finish out was why I thought there wasn't more interest. I haven't forgotten. Why I thought there wasn't more interest. And I've got a couple of theories. One, this kind of art is now being seen in a rather pejorative view. Native Americans aren't real happy with it for the most part. It's seen as being too constrained, as not letting free expression occur. And because it ends up being kitsch, so much of it, this obviously is way beyond that, because it becomes that later on, it has that connotation. So I think Jerry Brody's what some years ago didn't really help a lot either. So I'll say that. These are not WPA murals. They were done privately, funded privately. While they're on Route 66, they're an interesting comparison with the murals at Zimmerman Library, which have the white sheet in front of them these days. You don't know that story, check it out. At any rate, also done in 1939, nice compare and contrast. So they're not WPA. Well, things that are in the Route 66 world and has that has a little more synergy and interest. These are not, they're not WPA. They're strictly commercial, and that's seen as being exploitative of Native Americans. It just gets washed with that. And there's a lot of truth to that in many cases. They said talking to Yellow Horses Trading Post. Yeah, that kind of thing. So that's an issue. And I think Maurice Maisel was Jewish. He was a major contributor to Congregation Albert. Well, the family didn't continue with their Jewish heritage and background. It was, and that was an important thing to him. And whether that plays a part or not, I don't know, but I would not be surprised if it didn't. Especially being an Indian trader. And there were a number of Jews who were involved in that business and involved with Native American activity. Solomon Bebo comes to mind. You know, Bebo out near Acoma Laguna. This is the story of Jewish guy from New York comes out west, makes good, becomes Indian chief. He's the only white, he's the only Anglo who's ever become an Indian chief. Jewish. Well, the settlements were, you know, all over Kiowa, and then, so there's a long tradition of that. But I don't know, it could or could not. I'm sorry, I didn't question you.
I just wanted to make a comment that Olive Rush's family has reacquired her home on Canyon Road. And it
Yes.
will be open the first week in July. The website is oliverush.org. And in addition to her studio being restored, the garden is also quite beautiful to look at.
Oh, cool.
Number two, I just wanted to reflect that as the librarian at the Santa Fe Indian School, I took my students in, I guess it was the early 90s. We were doing a survey on the art and the architecture of the Indian school, who did it, when they did it, how it fit in the history of the school. The dining room murals had been done by Olive and
Right.
school students. So we took the students down to the Maisel murals and interviewed Theodore Sweeney and Joe Herrera about their experience in painting those murals. The interviews were done by the students, so they're not like professional oral history things, but it was a very interesting example. And also, I'm president of the chapter of the National New Deal Preservation Association in New Mexico, which has restored olive rush murals down at New Mexico State University. And so we could maybe revisit that and see if there were any similarities about the things that were used to restore those murals and whether that information could be helpful to the Garcias.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much. That's important information. I wish I'd known about those interviews back in the day. I think you had your hand up first time.
I was wondering, this question for the Garcias, what are you planning on doing with the building?
We've had a few different ideas. One that we were very, very close to being able to put together was, you know, everyone always says that you want to see good art, go to Santa Fe, which
No.
is Albuquerque, and I always don't really like that, but that's what people tell people. So I'm very close with a lot of the gallery owners in Santa Fe, and so I had about 7 or 8 of the top galleries that were gonna each have a space in the building and exhibit some things, and would be great for Albuquerque people, but also a nice transition to get tourists up to Santa Fe. But what we really want to do, and we're working with Robert Gallegos now, who's a legendary dealer in getting some silversmiths to work back in the basement area again. And we're remodeling that space so that people can go in and see that work being done. So it's similar to the original concept of the way that the business was, although probably not on such a large scale. Those are a couple things that we've been
So it will
interested
be
in.
open to the public at specific hours or,
Well, if we did that plan, it would be a business, so.
but, okay, so are you going to eventually have like certain days of the month where people can come and look?
Can't they still look from the street?
You can see them from the street.
No, you can't, I mean, you can't see.
I said I'd be happy to host this group anytime if they want to come and see it and open it up. I think that's what I said earlier, so you're all more than welcome.
Thank you so much.
That's great. That's really good deal. The last rumor I heard was root pub. That's
Never.
So like I said, that was a rumor. So it's really, that was a rumor back in the day when that was all happening. And I'm so glad to hear that those are your ideas. It's all be fabulous.
You have another question.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I have a question. Is Norman Maisel still alive?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. I think he's dead.
You died a long time.
Oh, Norman? No, yeah, Norman's been dead a long time. Norman's been dead a long time. Maurice,
I went to color.
Maurice died in 68.
Norman was my friend. He lives in, he has a ranch.
Oh,
I thought Norman was Nita's husband. Oh, Norman was her
He
brother.
son.
Oh, so-
oh, the son. Oh, okay, we're talking about different parts of the family.
Yeah, he
That's
wasn't
okay.
involved with the store of it.
Right.
But his father had this
okay,
covered
yeah,
way,
yeah, I got you.
Yeah, it's the next,
but he wasn't Maisel, was.
Right.
yeah, we got a generational thing going on there. Somebody, there was. Yes? No? There were a couple back there that I just ignored.
I graduated from high school with him. I just wonder if he was still around.
I really don't, I've not done the genealogy of the family, I really don't know. And Skip didn't really, Skip was a taciturn guy, so. Didn't go into a lot of detail because it wasn't really that, it wasn't that important. But to Skip's credit, he was always very good to me, he always gave me very good access. And without his support and allowing me to do it, it wouldn't have happened, and I just couldn't have done it, so. I'll say good things about him, and now it sounds like things are gonna continue on and be very, very positive, the future sounds very positive for us, so that's good. Skip brought it back, the building had a fire in the '70s and had fallen apart.
It's very true.
And Skip ended up acquiring it in 1980. And rebuilt it, and reacquired the building itself was no longer in family hands. And Skip built it up and over a fairly short time was able to acquire the building again and put it back to kind of what it had been. So, for what that's worth. Great, anything else? Who there? I have gazillions of books. They're signed, $10 a piece. I was fun.
Thanks.